on a few important preventative measures to share. To prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, we remind all in-person participants to keep their earpieces away from all microphones at all times. When you are not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table. Please consult the cards on the table for the guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. These measures are in place so that we can protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters, and conduct our business without interruption. Thank you all for your cooperation. We have with us today Minister Joel Lightbound. He will make a statement, and then we will have questions in the room. If you are on the line, please use the raise hand function to indicate that you would like to ask a question. Go ahead, Minister.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And just so we're clear, I have remarks entirely in French to begin with, and then entirely in English. So they're both the same, but I'll start with the French remarks and then go through the English remarks. Alors, merci d'être là aujourd'hui. Il y a quelques mois, les Canadiens ont élu notre gouvernement avec un mandat clair de réduire nos dépenses d'opération pour assurer la durabilité et la pérennité de nos services essentiels. Ils nous ont demandé d'agir avec détermination et de ne pas remettre à demain les décisions difficiles mais nécessaires qui s'imposent dans l'intérêt du pays. C'est exactement ce qu'on fait aujourd'hui en annonçant des mesures concrètes pour stabiliser la situation financière de Post Canada. Parce que Post Canada, c'est une institution nationale vitale. C'est une institution.
It's the older than the country itself that has contributed to build it. For 158 years, postal workers have served Canadians in good weather, bad weather, in the villages, rural and urban areas, in rural and indigenous communities. Canada Post is an institution that deserves to be saved. And today, let's be clear, it's an institution that needs to be saved. It's an institution that needs to be saved because since 2018, it has accumulated losses of more than $5 billion because only in 2024, the company declared about $1.3 billion in operational losses that needed an infusion of $1.4 billion this year to prevent the company from becoming insolvent. Now, in the second quarter of 2025, the company has lost $407 million, and this is the worst quarter in its history. And today, Canada Post is losing about $10 million every day. In summary, Canada Post is facing an existential crisis. So now, how did we get to this point? Times have changed. 20 years ago, Canada Post was delivering 5.5 billion letters per year. Today, it's 2 billion. During this time, the number of residencies continue increasing, and the result is that there's more mails going to more addresses. The costs have remained the same. Canadians are receiving more parcels, something that could have saved the company. But now Canada Post has lost ground. In 2019, the company was delivering 62%. Now it's 24%, a spectacular loss in 6 years alone, while the private competitors have gained ground with rapid services, more flexible and more competitive services. To these two trends, there's government restrictions imposed over the years and tight relations between the corporation and the union that has undermined the corporation's capacity to adapt. At the end of all that, the situation is clear. Canada Post is insolvent, is providing essential services throughout the country, particularly in rural, remote, and indigenous communities. Canadians are attached to this corporation, but the solution cannot be to continuously infuse more money year after year. We need to act, and we need to start the transformation of Canada Post. In its report of the 15th of May, the Industrial Inquiry Commission led by Kaplan gave recommendations. That is why we are announcing that today we are announcing the recommendations of the Kaplan report, and we shall implement all these recommendations that were made to the government to stabilize the financial situation of Canada Post. In detail, first of all, I'm instructing Canada Post to ease its delivery standards. Mail is being delivered 2 to 3 days. By adjusting its standards, particularly by withdrawing the requirement to deliver to every address 5 days a week and allowing other non-urgent mail to be sent by land, they will be able to save about 20 million per year. Furthermore, The government is ending the moratorium on community mailbox conversions. Already, three-quarters of Canadians receive their mail either in a community mailbox or in a mailbox in a building or in a rural mailbox. Only a quarter of Canadians still receive their mail directly at home. This is a costly service. For example, delivery per address per year per resident is about 200 and something dollars compared to $19 in a community mailbox. Today, we are authorizing Canada Post to convert about 4,000 additional mailboxes, and this would allow a savings of about 400 million at the end. Furthermore, as the Kaplan report recommended, we are removing the rural moratorium and have asked Canada Post to come back with a plan to protect services in rural and remote and indigenous communities. To give you the context, the rural moratorium was imposed in 2014 and covers about 4 million sites and has not changed for 30 years. The country has changed. As a result, zones that used to be rural have become suburbs or even urban areas. In some cases, we have several offices close together, some meters away, which have to remain open in spite of because of the moratorium. And this prevents the corporation from tightening its network and to become more competitive. Let me be clear. Canada Post has the obligation to serve all Canadians everywhere in the country, and this situation will not change. Lastly, the government is reviewing the process that has to do with stamp rates. The objective is to modernize it and to speed up the process, as Commissioner Kaplan recommended. The measures announced today will help stabilize the financial situation of Canada Post and help save up to $500 million a year. It will not be sufficient. In addition to the measures I'm announcing today, Canada Post must adapt. Just as the government is revising its expenditure to be more efficient, to invest more, and to protect our social programs, I'm asking Canada Post to do the same. I'm therefore asking them to take immediate action to respond to these financial challenges, reduce operational costs, and this also means reviewing and lightening its management structures. Canada Post is facing an existential crisis. We need to respond. Today's announcement wants to make sure that Canada Post is ready to take up the challenge and continue serving Canadians for generations to come. I know that Canadians care about the future of Canada Post. Canada Post workers care about its future, and its management also care about Canada Post. I am optimistic that today's announcement will help renew the relationship so that we can save this institution that deserves to be saved. Thank you very much. I'll now move over to my remarks in English.
So a few months ago, Canadians elected our government and gave us a clear mandate. They asked us to reduce operating costs so as to ensure that essential services are sustainable. They asked us to be decisive and to lead in the best interest of Canadians. Today, we're doing just that by taking concrete actions to stabilize the financial situation at Canada Post and by taking steps to chart its future path. Because Canada Post is a vital national institution, an institution older than our country and that has helped build it. Because for 158 years, and to this day, postal workers have connected Canadians, rain or shine, in small town and in big cities, providing a lifeline to hundreds of northern, Indigenous, and rural communities. Because Canada Post is an institution worth saving, and because at this junction in its history, it's an institution that needs saving. To give you a sense of what I mean when I say it's an institution that needs saving, since 2018, Canada Post has accumulated more than $5 billion in losses. Last year, in 2024, it operated at a loss of $1.3 billion and required an injection of $1 billion in January to keep it afloat. In the second quarter of 2025, the corporation lost $407 million, their worst quarter ever. And at present, the corporation is losing $10 million every day. In short, Canada Post is effectively insolvent, and it is facing an existential crisis. Now, how did we get there? Well, 20 years ago, Canada Post delivered 5.5 billion letters per year. Today, that number is 2 billion. And while the number of letters has dropped, the number of households has increased. Thus, Canada Post is delivering fewer letters to more addresses. Second, while letter mail volumes decline, Canadians have been sending and receiving more packages than ever before. But they're turning increasingly away from Canada Post and toward private competitors who are faster and more cost efficient. In 2019, Canada Post delivered 62% of all parcels sent in Canada. Today, it's less than 24% and shrinking fast. Now, the third reason we got here is that government-imposed restrictions and a stalled relationship between management and labor have hindered Canada Post's capacity to evolve and adapt. So the bottom line is this. Canada Post is effectively insolvent. It provides an essential service to Canadians, and in particular to rural, remote, and Indigenous communities, and Canadians are rightfully attached to it and want it saved. However, repeated bailouts from the federal government are not the solution. So where do we go from here? In its report of May 15, the Industrial Inquiry Commission, led by William Kaplan, addressed these challenges and provided a path forward. And today, I'm announcing that we're accepting all of the recommendations directed to the government by William Kaplan in its report, and that we're making the following changes to stabilize the financial situation at Canada Post. I'm instructing Canada Post to introduce flexibilities in their delivery standards. The average households receive just 2 letters per week, yet operations are still designed for much higher volumes. Adjusting delivery standards will allow non-urgent mail to travel by ground instead of air and will save more than $20 million a year to the corporation. Next, the government is removing the moratorium on the conversion to community mailboxes. 3/4 of Canadians already receive mail through community, apartment, or rural mailboxes, while 1/4 still receive door-to-door delivery. It's an expensive service, and by way of example, delivering mail to an individual address costs the corporation $279 a year, whereas delivering mail to a community mailbox costs $157 a year. And 77% of Canadians already receive mail through various form of community boxes. As such, I'm authorizing Canada Post to introduce community mailboxes to approximately 4 million more addresses, which will save the corporation nearly $400 million per year in due term. Now, as recommended in the Kaplan report, we'll also be lifting the rural moratorium, and I'm instructing Canada Post to come back with a plan that will ensure protection of service in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities. To give some context, the rural moratorium was imposed in 1994 and covers close to 4,000 locations. It has not evolved in 30 years, but Canada has changed. This means that areas that used to be rural may now be suburban or even urban. It also means that multiple post offices operating near each other, including some just a few hundred meters apart, are required to stay open because of the moratorium. Lifting this moratorium will allow Canada Post to right-size its network to adapt to today's demographics, but I want to be clear. Canada Post has an obligation to serve all Canadians in every community in Canada, and that will not change. Lastly, the government is reviewing the process for increases to the stamp rate to modernize and shorten it in line with Commissioner Kaplan's recommendations. Taken together, these measures will help stabilize Canada Post's financial situation by generating close to $500 million per year. But there's more work to do. As our government reviews its expenses so that we can spend less and invest more, I'm asking Canada Post to do the same. In addition to the measures I'm announcing today, the corporation must adapt. I'm asking Canada Post to take immediate steps to address its financial challenges. That means finding efficiencies, reducing costs, reducing overhead, and I want to be clear, that also means reviewing and lightening its management structure. This is a pivotal moment, not just for the corporation, but for Canadians who rely on it every single day. Today's announcement is about making sure Canada Post can meet this moment and continue to serve Canadians for generations to come. Canadians care about the future of Canada Post, and I know both workers and management share that same commitment. I hope that in light of today's announcement and the work ahead, both management and the union can return to the table with a renewed relationship and work toward a viable future. Canada Post is facing an existential crisis. It's an institution that is worth saving, and we're beginning the work today. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll turn now to the room for questions. We will start with one question and one follow, and we'll begin with Alessia Pasafume from the Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister. The union has said that they were not told that this announcement was coming and that a meeting you had scheduled with them was postponed. Why didn't you keep them in the loop about the changes that were going to be made?
Yes, well, first, I want to thank the union. We've had a productive conversation Friday last week, and some of the issues that they raised are reflected in the announcement I'm making today, notably around reviewing the management structure at Canada Post, but also the process in terms of increasing the price of stamps. Now, as far as a meeting is concerned this week, I was not aware, but I'll be always happy to meet with the union to discuss because they play an essential role in Canada Post's future. And I know that just as much as I do, just as much as Canadians do, they care very much about the future of Canada Post and its financial viability.
To Canada Post here, have you made any progress in finding a buyer for the pandemic era mobile hospitals, or are we just stuck with them?
I'll be happy to take this offline after the Canada Post announcement, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Christian Noel, Radio Canada.
Bonjour, Monsieur Lightbound.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lightbound. For those listening to us from home, to be clear, is this the beginning of the end for day-to-day, door-to-door delivery? Answer, there are two things you've just stated. First of all, for 77% of Canadians, there's no residential delivery. Most Canadians receive their mail in community mailboxes or in buildings, so not necessarily at their door. Yes, we are lifting the obligation to deliver letter mail every day, 5 days a week at home. It will depend on operational needs of Canada Post. It's not going to happen overnight. The corporation has to inform Canadians. This reflects the reality where it is becoming less necessary considering the reduction in volume.
Question. First, 77% of Canadians don't receive their mail delivered directly at their door. They receive it through rural mailboxes or community mailboxes or in apartment buildings. So we're lifting the moratorium, which will mean 4 million more addresses will now be covered, well, in years to come through community mailboxes. So that's the first part. The second part is we're lifting the requirement for Canada Post to deliver mail every day, so 5 days a week, to individuals. That will allow the corporation to go based on volume, so deliver where delivery is needed instead of going every day to every address.
J'aimerais savoir donc ce que vous dites aux personnes.
Now, what are you telling people with reduced mobility and seniors who have to receive mail, who are now receiving mail at home? Now, is this resolve the financial problem of Canada Post, which is facing an existential crisis? You are saying that it's not going to resolve the problem. What else can be done to help Canada Post from stop losing more money every day? Answer. In my own writing, 80% of the population receive their mail directly at home. Now, considering seniors, a program was introduced when community mailbox conversion started, and it works very well. When someone has reduced mobility, has difficulty getting to a community mailbox, they can obtain assistance. As these changes take root for the 4 million addresses that have to be converted into community mailboxes, Canada Post would inform the population of this program and how to access it to make sure that all Canadians, irrespective of their circumstances, could continue receiving their mail. So that's what I have to say about seniors and people with reduced mobility. The second thing, the financial viability of Canada Post starts with today's announcement. It will not stop today. It is certain that there's still a lot of work to be done. That's why I'm asking the corporation to review its operations, reduce cost, review its management structure. We can't have a serious discussion about the financial viability of Canada Post in the long term if those recommendations are not implemented, which are the fruit not only of my reflections with my team, but of the of Commissioner Kaplan, who thoroughly studied the issue and made recommendations to the government. So this would help save about $500 million a year. I I and the government believe that Canada Post is an essential service. It's an institution that needs to be served. There are two options. Either we continue infusing funds to Canada Post, providing more and more money to Canada Post, or we act now, we invest in the transition and transformation of Canada Post to help them get to financial viability. I think it's possible.
Yeah. So as I've mentioned, 77% of Canadians don't receive their mail delivered directly at their door. So for the remaining 4 million addresses that will now be covered through community mailboxes, uh, as Canada Post has in years past converted and implemented the community mailboxes, it's also developed a program to assist with those senior citizens or people with disabilities who might have issues reaching the community mailboxes to make sure that they have access to their mail. So as this is rolled out across the 4 million addresses that remain to be converted, Canada Post will inform Canadians as they go and make sure that that program is well known, well understood, and it's worked very efficiently to make sure that all Canadians, regardless of their circumstances, have access to their mail.
Stephanie Taylor, The National Post.
Hi, Minister. I think Canadians understand the numbers where things are with Canada Post, but what makes you think that what makes your government think that people will be accepting these changes? I'm thinking particularly of seniors and those relying on rural postal offices that could be closed, and those who do still like and maybe use the door-to-door delivery.
That's a very good question, and I think collectively as a country we've had that debate in the past, and I remember certainly 2015 and even Denis Coderre in Montreal removing a community mailbox. However, the reality has changed over the last 10 years. It's changed a lot over the last 5 years. It's changed in many ways. First, it's changed the financial situation of Canada Post has changed drastically. While it was profitable in 2015, it is clearly no longer viable financially. And the second thing, the reality has changed in terms of the number of letters we're getting, how we're using Canada Post services. So I think there's an understanding amongst Canadians that something needs to happen if we want to preserve that institution. And I think what we're doing today is the start of this transformation. And the goal ultimately is to save Canada Post.
I got on the fa- Sorry.
Oui. Ouais, ok. Oui.
I was asked what makes us to believe that today Canadians are ready to accept the changes we're proposing. Lots of changes have already been implemented. When we talk about the fact that 77% of Canadians already receive their mailboxes in community mailboxes, that is important. I, like many others, remember the collective debates we had about that in 2015. And I think about Denis Coderre in Montreal, who brought down a community mailbox. The reality is that 10 years ago, he did that with all pomp. But the attitude of Canadians was different, and the financial reality of Canada Post is totally different. In 2015, Canada Post was profitable. It's no longer the case. And since 2018, there's a cumulative deficit of 5 billion, and we had to inject money. And if we look into the future, Canadians will continue giving Canada Post more money just to keep it afloat. I think that aware of that reality and the fact that people are using the post less and less, particularly because of the pandemic, we understand that these actions are decisive, but will help save this institution, which plays an essential role and which Canadians care about.
Do you have an idea in mind of how long this phase out process would take from the door to door delivery to kind of all addresses, or as many as Canada Post might want to, with the barring the exceptions, to
Yeah.
get to the community mailboxes?
We're-
How long is that phase
We're
out?
talking about 4 million addresses. It'll happen over the course of the next 9 years, the bulk of which will be in the next 4 years, 3-4 years.
Olivier Ferrand-Brosset, TVA.
Merci Mia. Bonjour.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Minister. Returning to profitability by Canada Post, is this a reality? Is it realistic someday? Yes, I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think it's possible. When we look at today's announcement, ultimately about $500 million. When we look at what we need to do to change stamp rates to reflect the reality of other countries, if we look, I'm giving them 45 days to do so, to give a plan on how they would respond to these financial challenges and measures to review their structures and management structures and operations. There's something that we do not control, clearly indicated in the Kaplan report, considering the flexibility and latitude that Canada Post may have to deliver mail on weekends, recruit part-time workers. That is up to the management and the union. I think they both care about the financial viability of the company. If all that is done, it's possible to get to a break-even point. Question: with the savings expected and the demands you're making for Canada Post to reduce its operational cost, we will not get to the 1 billion that we're expecting. What would be an acceptable loss that the government can accept in the short term? Answer: I have another perspective. If nothing is done, new losses will be unacceptable. Today we are talking about 2.7 billion per year, 8 billion over the next 5 years. This is significant. So we need to try, in my opinion. When we look at the Kaplan recommendations, it's clear that it's not all. Corporations also need to make some major efforts. What has prevented Canada Post from modernizing? Well, we either inject money or transform the institution so that we have lower deficits and ultimately get to financial viability. That is clear.
West Citizen.
Hello, Minister. Thanks.
Nice seeing you.
Nice to see you too. Quick question about the direction to the corporation, especially around efficiencies and the lightening and reviewing of the management structure. I'm just wondering and just curious a bit, hearing a bit more about that direction. And did you give them a target? And are those efficiencies just for the management level, or are we going to see the efficiencies all the way through Canada Post?
Yeah. So it's throughout the organization, but I want, they must look at management, with a cold, hard look. And I haven't set a target specifically, but I've given them 45 days. And I think there's an understanding that as our government is going through its own comprehensive expenditure review, Canada Post needs to do the same.
Now, I understand that the Kaplan adoption of the Kaplan recommendations is kind of a short-term solution now. I'm curious about the road ahead and that medium to long-term transformation of Canada Post. Can you take us through what are the next steps of this process? What are the conversations being had? And what is the roadmap for the government with Canada Post?
Well, I think we're starting with a pretty big chantier, if you will, with these lifting the moratoriums and going forward with all the recommendations that Kaplan has highlighted for the government. Now, Canada Post needs to go through a review every 5 years. It's been 7 years since the last review. There will be a review seeking to look at what can be Canada Post in 10, 15, 20 years. I know that OGO, the Parliamentary Committee, will also be looking at Canada Post, most probably. Those reviews, conversations will help inform us. But in the meantime, and I think, given that Canada Post is losing $10 million a day today, we need to take the short-term and immediate steps that will allow Canada Post to, find a more stable financial footing.
Remy Autier, CPAC.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre.
Good afternoon, Mr. Minister. You're announcing these changes, which indirectly will impact the workers of Canada Post. There's a labor dispute going on for months now between Canada Post and its union. Was this the right time to announce the need for change, the need for a plan to change the structure? Is there no danger here? Answer: the current dispute has been going on for 20 months. In my capacity as minister responsible for public funds and a government responsible for funds, at a time when the corporation is losing $10 million a day, asking for injection of funds from the federal government, and the requests keep increasing, I don't think I have the leisure to wait any longer. My hope is, after speaking with the union and management, is that the two parties definitely care about the long-term viability of Canada Post, not necessarily the same vision on how to get there. What I hope is that by sending the message today that that will change to transform Canada Post because it's necessary, because the corporation is facing an existential crisis, it could restore the relationship so that the two parties may negotiate in light of today's announcement. Question: today's announcement covers one of the two major aspects of Canada Post's work, mail delivery. You said that there's been a drop of the market share for parcel delivery. In your opinion, are there any elements that you're offering or that Canada Post could offer as a solution to take back part of the market share? How do you think that Canada Post could play a greater role in parcel delivery? Answer: it's fundamental. Even when we think about community mailboxes, we think of the little boxes for letters. There are also the boxes for parcels. This could be an efficient network that is very broad to deliver parcels throughout the country. Now, there are issues related to the capacity of Canada Post to deliver during the weekends, for example, to deliver quickly in a competitive manner, and that is beyond my capacity as minister. It's up to the union and the management to agree on those issues to improve its capacity to be competitive.
Good morning, Minister. Is this officially the end of the government bailing out Canada Post?
There will be instances, if you look at the financials, where Canada Post will have to come back to the government for cash injections. So no, but it's a clear message that it will not be, there are limits to our capacity to bail out Canada Post year after year, and we need to, it needs to show a path to financial viability. That's what we're clearly asking the corporation. Oui, on me demandait, je suis pas habitué à ces, en français, en
I'm not used to switching from English to French. I was being asked if this was the end of the bailing out of Canada Post by the federal government. The answer is no. There will be clearly situations when you look at the financial projections of the corporation where the government will still need to inject funds to help out the corporation in its operations. It is, well, we are clearly establishing limits, boundaries, and we are sending a message to the corporation that it needs to find a path towards financial viability. We are giving it the means to get that, including by lifting the moratoriums that have stopped it from doing so.
What exactly does this mean for people who are living in rural areas? And also, Canadians don't like cuts to essential services like this. How do you get them to accept this at a time of austerity?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to be extremely clear, when we're lifting the rural moratorium, it's really because that moratorium was put in place in 1994, covers, from memory, 3,962 post offices that used to be rural, but that aren't anymore. And I'll give you some examples. You can think of post offices in Richmond Hill, Gatineau, Stittsville here in the Ottawa region, Burnaby. who might have been rural in 1994, but are clearly more suburban, even urban in some instances. Now, that moratorium prevents Canada Post from closing these post offices or even transforming them to build housing. I have, some examples of locations where if Canada Post was allowed to transform and sell some of its land, we could build hundreds of units. So we're lifting that moratorium to address that challenge primarily. I'm asking the corporation to come back with a plan that will clearly, make sure that rural, remote, Indigenous communities are not impacted. And I want to be crystal clear on this. We know how important Canada Post services are in many, more remote communities across the land, and the goal is to make sure that these services are preserved. And in fact, if resources are better allocated to underserved areas as opposed to overserviced areas, we might find gains in rural and remote communities.
They don't like cuts to essential services.
I see it differently. I think, there are choices that we need to make as a government. And the path forward, if we're not doing anything, is $10 million in losses every day. It's billions in repeated bailouts year after year. And that means cuts to some services. So I think there are ways while protecting essential services that Canada Post offers Canadians, that we can make the corporation more efficient so that it can continue its mission, and that we as a government can continue, many other essential missions of the states when we think of housing, childcare, support for seniors, and so on and so forth.
We'll now turn online for questions. If you are online and you have a question, please use the raised hand function. We'll start with Hélène Buzetti.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Lightbound. Vous l'avez mentionné vous-même
Interpretation will resume when the conditions will be met.
sur la transition vers les boîtes postales en 2015. Vous dites, bon, à l'époque, il n'y avait pas de déficit, mais ça a pris 2-3 années avant que les déficits embarquent. Est-ce que ça ne témoigne pas d'un manque flagrant de vision de la part de votre gouvernement? Et vous avez fait référence à M. Coder. La raison pour laquelle il voulait détruire ces boîtes postales, c'est parce qu'en milieu urbain densément construit, ça peut devenir extrêmement encombrant. Donc, j'aimerais savoir, est-ce que vous avez une solution à ça qu'on ne semblait pas avoir à l'époque?
Oui, pour répondre à...
To answer your first question, the mandate we received in April, and I think many observers, including you, have noted that there's a change that the new government and Prime Minister Carney wants, and we're doing what Quebecers and Canadians expect, and that is take difficult decisions and spend less so we can invest more and preserve the social programs I mentioned in my previous answer. Now, talking about the transition to community mail boxes, Canada Post has great experience in that, and I believe that even operationally speaking, they will be able to do that, respect the integrity of territories.
Pas de lien avec la première, mais je me demande s'il n'y a pas quelque chose qui est prématuré dans cette annonce aujourd'hui, alors que, objectivement, vous ne faites rien pour accélérer le règlement du conflit de travail. Le rapport Kaplan est assez clair qu'il y a des pertes énormes, par exemple, avec ces postiers qui, s'ils finissent avant la fin de la journée, ils ne peuvent pas être déplacés sur une autre ligne pour aller faire le travail supplémentaire d'un collègue. On doit payer des heures supplémentaires alors que d'autres personnes qui ne travaillent pas alors qu'ils sont payés quand même. Est-ce qu'on n'aurait pas dû régler ce problème-là avant d'arriver et faire des changements fondamentaux dans le service qui est offert aux citoyens?
Oui, d'abord...
Answer. To the extent that it depends on negotiations between the union and management, I respect the process. That is not within my purview. What is within my control as a government is clearly indicated in the Kaplan report: lift the moratorium, change the process for stamp rates, and change delivery standards. And that's what we're doing today.
Par exemple.
C'est pas
answer. That is not our objective for now. Today's announcement, I may be being optimistic, but I hope that today's announcement will provide a new ground for negotiation so that the parties could negotiate in light of what has been announced today. As you know, the financial situation of Canada Post is very precarious.
Good afternoon. With respect to the labor issue here, can this kind of restructuring be done without major wage cuts or layoffs? I mean, given you're talking about billions of dollars of losses and letter volume having fallen 70% in recent years?
Yeah, I think when you look at what we're announcing, for instance, in terms of community mailboxes, the implementation will be phased, and a lot of the reduction in workforce will be able to happen through attrition. But at the same time, I'm not managing Canada Post on a day-to-day basis. I leave it to the corporation to review its structure, review its operation to reduce costs. Because as I've highlighted, we cannot go on, Canadians can't go on footing the bill day after day, year after year, with increasing deficits.
To follow up, other industries like autos and airlines that have heavily unionized workforces, when there are cutbacks, there are often other labor costs like pension shortfalls. Are those kinds of things that you're going to be looking at as well, or will taxpayers be picking up that part of any tab as well?
That's a good question. My understanding is the pension is fully funded. That's not an issue, but we'll, of course, as the as the sole shareholder of Canada Post, I'll always keep a close eye on its financial situation, and which is why I'm here today.
We have time for one more question online, and it'll be Josh Rubin from the Toronto Star.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. Just wondering what you would say to some of those Canada Post employees who are almost certainly looking at losing their jobs, as part of this restructuring, as part of this new vision for the corporation. I mean, what message would you give to them? And do you have some sympathy for people who put in decades of work and kind of gone out, the rain or snow and all of the poetic stuff that we've always heard over the years?
Well, first, I would say that I have the utmost respect and admiration for postal workers for everything they've done for years to Canadians and that they do day in and day out. And what this announcement is about saving Canada Post, making sure that it has a future, a viable future. And I think it will require postal workers, to work with us. And I'm confident that we can get through this and save Canada Post.
And just one quick follow-up, if I may. I mean, you have kind of, I don't want to say avoided, but you've kind of danced around a little bit about the possibility of layoffs. Are you saying that there won't be any layoffs, or is it more realistic to expect layoffs? And if so, do you have any particular scale of layoffs? I mean, point taken that management takes the ultimate responsibility, but this is a political decision today, so that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, well, the political decision is that Canadians can be footing an ever-growing bill year after year. Now, I'm not, in the daily management of Canada Post. I've asked them for a plan within 40 days on how they intend to reduce costs. I've asked them to take a cold, hard look at their management structure, and I'll be reviewing their plan when it comes. But the goal here and the political objective is that, we can't go on with Canada Post losing $10 million a day and Canadian taxpayers footing the bill.
Thank you so much. That concludes today's press conference.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.